L1 and interface between acquisition and learning. An important thing to remember about language awareness is that language awareness assumes that there is an interface or interconnection or an overlap between language acquisition and language learning. Now, the difference between language acquisition and language learning reminds us of Krishnan, who said acquisition of a language happens in natural settings, learning of a language happens in formal settings. LA believes that learning actually leads to acquisition, and there is an interface or interconnection between them. Similarly, it argues that there is an interconnection between L1 and L2 because both the languages are sensitive to the cultures in which they are spoken. Both the languages reflect the culture of the places they belong to, and they more or less function in a similar or a different way. But there is a connection between the two. So we talked about Krishnan's theory and how it departs from Krishnan's theory, thinking that explicit instruction does not lead to acquisition. Acquisition can only happen through natural settings. LA believes that whenever we teach our learners explicitly or clearly any rules about the language, or we talk about the language, then it leads to acquisition after some time. If we want to understand what do we mean by this, then think about the example that we took earlier of riding a bicycle. So when you learned to ride a bicycle initially, you were helped by somebody and you were constantly told what to press and how to pedal, how to maintain your balance. Those instructions were explicit instructions, clearly given to you. You were not shown how a bicycle is being ridden by somebody and asked to, you just learned from it, but you were given explicit instructions of how to ride a bike. But over the time, once you actually paid attention in the process of learning to ride a bicycle, you learned it so well, you internalized those rules so well, that now when you are riding a bicycle or your bike or your car, you're not even thinking of those rules. So you see that explicit learning has turned into acquisition, which is more automated, and it is almost an internalized automatic process. Ellis 1992 also talks about the same thing. He argues that once consciousness is raised about a specific feature of a language, whatever it might be, through formal instruction, the way we do it in the classrooms, the learners remain aware of that feature over the time. Then L1 is a useful point of departure. So we can talk about some eatable, for instance, in used in that culture of which we are learning the second language, and we say it is just like a samosa. So the learner, instead of trying to figure out what it looks like, can immediately make a connection. So taking L1 as a point of departure in discussions, language awareness raises consciousness about the certain aspects of second language. And then the learners are actually encouraged to talk about language. When they are talking about language, how language actually works, that is the meta language or meta talk, it encourages reflection and it facilitates the acquisition process itself. Having said that, please remember that language awareness pedagogical theory should only be seen in as complementary to communicative methodology. It cannot be a replacement of communicative methodology, because otherwise we have a problem that we are talking about the language but not actually practicing using a language at all.